Have you ever heard an atheist say something about the Bible that rocked you and caused you to doubt your faith? Well, today I want to show you what to do the next time you hear someone speak confidently against the Bible, and I'll use a popular YouTube atheist as today's example, as he confidently says that Genesis chapter 30 promotes things like sexual assault against women, the kidnapping of children, and a big example of the Bible contradicting genuine science. Last time, this man, whose name is Hemant Mehta, made up a sexual assault claim based on Genesis chapter 29, and it didn't turn out well for him then. But let's see if he can do any better today. Let's hear what he has to say when he talks about Jacob being encouraged by one of his wives to marry her handmaiden Bilhah. Let's listen.
Is Bilhah cool with this? I mean, we're never told, but I'm guessing she's not allowed to say no.
But he couldn't leave it there, could he? Because 20 seconds later, when Jacob is intimate with Bilhah, Hemant said this.
That was another Bible passage describing rape. I just want to point that out.
So he starts by asking the question, is Bilhah cool with this scenario? And he guesses that she's not allowed to say no. But firstly, he is arguing from the silence of the text, just like he did in the previous video I did. I could easily say, I guess she could say no. Neither of us is proving anything if we rely on silence in the text alone. But I mentioned in a previous video, we have an example in Genesis chapter 16 already of a woman not being happy with mistreatment and running away, which is a clear sign of not being happy. We also see God side with her in that scenario by speaking negatively of the situation. But the question you should be asking is, why would she not be allowed to say no? If Jacob was just going around assaulting women, verse 4 would be irrelevant because it says Jacob took Bilhah as a wife. Why go through this sort of formal procedure? And this leads us nicely into the second bold claim he makes about stealing children. Let's hear what he has to say.
And Rachel doesn't get to say, God's given me a son. That kid is not her son. There's no formal adoption going on. Really, this is just a kidnapping.
What this account is explaining in this passage is something very common then and even still common today called surrogacy. This is where a woman who is not able to get pregnant asks another woman to carry a child for them. Now, unless Hemant is against surrogacy, his point was filled with rhetoric, yes, and not much else. And before we get to Hemant saying Genesis 30 goes completely against science, let's discuss how Hemant was so shocked that Jacob was still intimate with Bilhah.
Wait, Jacob is still sleeping with the servant? Is this not news to anyone?
Now, I want to say three things. Firstly, this is a prime example in the Bible why going against God's original order of one woman and one man is problematic, because time and time again, men with multiple wives in the Bible run into problems because of it. Secondly, the culture in that time was that more children was a blessing, which from a biblical perspective is true. So it's not a surprise Rachel wanted more than one surrogate child from her handmaiden Bilhah. But it also goes into the carnal nature of competition and fighting amongst the wives, as you can see. When you read verses 7 to 8, Rachel calls the child Naphtali, which means my wrestlings, because she fought with her sister and she believes that she defeated her. This for Rachel was not about following God, but beating her sister. Thirdly, even if Jacob treated Rachel as his favorite wife, obviously, he was still obligated now to provide his marital obligations for all of the women he married. And this is why Jacob still had relations with Leah and the handmaidens. Now, obviously, the climax of this video for Hemant was his apparent scientific error in Genesis chapter 30. But he even brought math into this video. And yes, it sounds funny. And yes, it belittles the Bible and makes it sound foolish. And yes, it's totally false. And I'll show you why after I play the clip. Comment below if you see why this makes no sense.
And why does Rachel think she's won? She's kidnapped 2 kids. Leah has 4. I mean, I know the Bible isn't a science book, but apparently it's not a math book either.
This isn't the first time Hemant has made this sort of analytical mistake, which I'll show you in a moment. But these are the ones which make me truly scratch my head the most. Because I can understand as a Christian, he doesn't believe the Bible like you and me. So he may call what we believe is a miracle foolish. But when he makes mistakes which are not based on faith, but him just not analyzing literature, it makes me feel like this is just entertainment for him. He's not concerned with truth or being charitable in any way. He says the Bible fails at math here because Rachel, with 2 children, says she has prevailed over her sister Leah with 4 children. But the Bible isn't saying 2 is greater than 4 here. Rachel is. And all the Bible is doing is documenting what she said. But somehow, reporting something now means you agree with the report. You see, you don't have to be a Christian to see this. Just think about the text reasonably and show a little bit of charity, And this reminds me of when I showed how Hemant Mehta doesn't understand how a family tree works a few videos back in this series. But let's talk about mandrakes now, which was a plant viewed superstitially as something that can help with pregnancy. Leah has some, Rachel says she wants them in turn for Jacob sleeping with Leah that night. And I truly believe this gives us some insights into God's view of this, but I'll share that with you after you hear how Hemant responds to this deal between the two sisters.
She bought his penis for the night with a plant, and he doesn't even ask questions.
Jacob obviously treated Rachel as the favorite and would likely, because of this, spend more evenings with her. They would obviously have to arrange some sort of rotation, but again, this highlights the problems with this and why God in the Old and New Testament wants one woman for one man. But this evening results in Leah becoming pregnant, who it seems had stopped bearing children at this time. But I believe one reason that God blessed her with more children was because Rachel was trusting in these superstitious things instead of trusting in him for conception. But let's now get to the science Hemant has a big problem with in this chapter. To simplify things, Jacob wants to leave with his wives and his children and wants payment for his work. Laban, his father-in-law, has much livestock because Jacob has managed them well and God blessed his work. So Jacob asks for some of the livestock. Laban agrees, but the same day he takes away the cattle that Jacob asked for. So Jacob is looking after most cattle Laban will keep. So Laban is trying to rip Jacob off again, but God will not allow Laban to do this. So let's listen to what he has to say.
What will he do? I'll tell you. He's gonna get revenge using science that doesn't make any sense.
Jacob continues to look after Laban's livestock, but he gets branches from specific trees, he cuts them so the inside is exposed and places them in front of the livestock when they are mating. Now let's listen to Hemant explain what happened.
Part of me wants to congratulate ancient Gregor Mendel here for conducting his own genetic experiments, while the rest of me is screaming, that's not how it works. Why would a striped piece of wood near the animals have any effect on their offspring's genes? It wouldn't.
Jacob was not engaging in some magic strategy to breed more animals for himself. He mentions clearly in the next chapter why he did what he did when he explains the situation to Leah and Rachel. Read Genesis 31 verse 7 to 16 for context. But in that text, Jacob explains how God gave him a dream during mating season, which helped him get the better of Laban. Two standout verses from chapter 31 are 8 to 9. It says, if he said thus, the speckled shall be thy wages, then all the cattle bear speckled. And if he said thus, the ring-striked shall be thy hire, then bear all the cattle ring-striked. Thus God has taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. Jacob understood by God's guidance, because of Laban's trickery and deceit, whatever happened, he would come out on top. And once you know this, it makes understanding chapter 30 a little easier. Because if Jacob is confident he is going to come out on top, all he needs to do is breed as many animals as he can. And this is where I believe the 3 types of branches put in the water comes in. I was reading some articles about this which suggest, based on research studies, Jacob didn't slash the wood because it made the animals give birth to children striped like the wood, but because these 3 wood types make it easier to produce more babies. Because when these types of wood are placed in water, and some of them obviously are slashed, they have medicinal benefits which produce healthier animals, which in turn would produce more and healthier livestock. And once you understand, Jacob knew he was going to win, and Jacob was not relying on magic but was trying to breed as many strong animals as possible because he knew he would end up with them. It shows you how crafty Jacob is for not allowing the weaker animals to mate in front of the wood that he had obviously placed in the water. He went out of his way to make sure Laban ended up with weak livestock for duping him in the case of Jacob's wives. I wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of someone like Jacob, but to be honest, with God by my side, someone like Jacob wouldn't stand a chance. And this is the whole point of this chapter. It's not failed science, even if you go with other reasonable interpretations of this passage, but it's trying to get you to realize that God always wins. So don't put your trust in mandrakes, your powers of trickery and deceit, but in the one true God. Because when you don't, you'll continue to look foolish for things like not understanding that people from different places normally speak different languages, as you'll see in chapter 31. God bless winners.